All right. Welcome everybody to the machine observations. I'm gonna give a quick couple notes at the top. Um, I'm gonna monitor chat, so if you want to ask questions in chat, you're welcome to. I'll make sure they get asked. The video will be posted probably publicly, so if you want your camera off, you're welcome to, and the chat will be posted as well. And um, that's it. So,
Okay,
so all right, go for it, Peggy.
cool, thanks. Okay. And yeah, welcome everyone. I think the only person I don't know here is Jota. So um, otherwise it's a fairly small meeting. Hello, how are you? My name's Peggy Newman. I'm the data manager at the Atlas of Living Australia, and I guess Peter and I co-convene the Machine Observations Interest Group. And just before we start, in my role as the convener, I feel compelled to follow an Australian practice, which is to acknowledge that I'm calling in from the lands of the Wurundjeri people, which is here in Melbourne, and I'd like to acknowledge those people as traditional owners and pay my respects to elders past and present. So today is a catch-up. We've got a list of a couple of topics that we can run through. We started the Machine Observations Interest Group maybe about 5 years ago now, and have met intermittently over the years. I've created a shared document for people to go and look at and participate in the meeting in any way that they kind of feel comfortable with. We can talk in the chat, the document. You can add your name and details to the document, and you can ask questions there and any interesting discussion points you might have. There's a link in that document to our web page and the motivation of the group. The group was established to as an interest group well, the function of an interest group within TABRIG is to oversee task groups. So if task groups come up as in related to our topic, we would be able to I don't know, give rise to those groups. We intended to be a point of contact to facilitate discussion on modelling machine observations in Darwin Core and the use of standards to support data publication. And what else have we got here? We've got another point of contact for machine observations in biodiversity infrastructures. So in our GRIFs and living atlases and what other infrastructures we have, because the publication data flows are not always that straightforward. We have been meeting really intermittently and not much at all more recently. We've got a Slack channel, which I'm really happy to add anyone to. I might add as well, Peter, we should probably revisit the motivation at some stage, because I think the introduction of CamTrap DP under the guidance of this group is really important and becoming becoming a well-known exchange format, and I think it's been a really successful thing so far, and we should probably be mentioning that more so. And I think that's kind of that's about it for my introduction. And I suppose you'll see in the shared document there that I've got a rough agenda, and yeah, perhaps we can start off by talking about the MoveBon initiative. So Peter and John, did you attend that in Washington just recently?
Yes, I did. John did as well remotely. And Sarah Davidson, who also signed up for this session but couldn't make it, was one of the co-organizers. And the idea of MoveBon, and I'll post a link once I can find the webpage, there's this concept of GeoBon, which is the biodiversity observation network, which is a bit of an interface between collected biodiversity data and policy. So it is a science policy interface, and they have thematic bonds, biodiversity observation networks under that umbrella. And the idea of MoveBon was to create one for movement data. So that movement data is considered more for policy to be used in essential biodiversity variables, to the sustainable goals, the global biodiversity framework, the targets that are listed there, and yeah, to create such an interface between science and policy and make sure that movement data is considered. At the workshop, which was held in Washington, D.C. in March, I think about 40 people were invited from all kinds of backgrounds, from data managers to policy related to scientists in movement ecology to managers of the big systems of movement data, to really think of the next steps that are necessary to create such a bond. Now, after this meeting, the organizers will go through the first steps of establishing such a bond. And the first thing they want to do is now also have working groups under that bond to tackle different aspects. And the one that is really relevant to us is data standardization and data flows, to really think, how is this data that is collected by so many sensors and then gets ideally to a number of community maintained platforms like MoveBank or OTN, ETN, and other platforms. From there, how can we get that data out of there so it can be used across all these platforms for science and then also for policy? And it was pretty clear that GBIF and also OBIS are probably the best platforms to publish data to, so it can be used for policy or for ABVs, especially since GBIF now also has a new functionality where you can aggregate occurrence data into cubes using a SQL API, which then really feeds into essential biodiversity variables. So, but that's a whole technical aspect and all the details haven't been worked out, but John and I were on a panel to discuss ideas on how that could be done. And Sarah and I have done a number of projects on standardizing GPS tracking data to Darwin Core. John and I have worked on mapping acoustic telemetry data to Darwin Core. So I think a lot of the building blocks are there, and now we're at the first stage of considering working groups to work on this. This working group under the umbrella of MoveBon is a lot related to what we want to do in this machine observations group, and also what a data standards group under the International Biologging Society also wants to do. The International Biologging Society, that working group on data standards is led by Sarah Davidson and Francesca Cagnini. We're also involved in MoveBon, and Sarah is also involved here. So there's not duplication of effort. It's just that the same work is now done in like 3 groups or under 3 umbrellas, and we'll have to see how we can align all of that. And there's maybe something we can discuss here. But yeah, I wish that Sarah was here to give her input on this too. But I really, really liked the MoveBon workshop. There was a lot of momentum there, met people that I've worked with but never met in real life. And yeah, so I would say the momentum for standardizing movement data has been renewed. Now, one of the things to consider is movement data here is smaller in scope than machine observations data. It's also smaller in scope than biologging data. There was a lot of focus on animal-borne sensors, so tags on fish or mammals or birds. Luckily, there was also a section in there for radar observed movement data. but most of the people were on the animal-born data. So yeah, there's a lot of terms flowing around on what movement data is, what biologging data is, what machine observation data is. I mean, this is in the movement data, more or less sense, so animal-born biologging data. So yeah, that's the status on there. And I think the working groups or survey for that is going to open up pretty soon. And yeah, that is something I can share through the Slack if you want to be involved.
That's cool. And those are the working groups across the two initiatives, the biologging and the MoveBon. And do you think, like it was talking about data standardization and that kind of stuff, is there, I guess my initial question when you were talking about that was talking about what are the major challenges to using movement data, right? For the bond type reporting and the EBVs, because if you treat them as simple occurrences, then that's kind of done, right? But we haven't necessarily mobilized a lot of this sort of data yet.
No, so, and I would say the challenges that MoveBon needs to address are more societal in nature than technical in nature. I mean, there is a technical component to it, and what we consider in the machine observations group or in TEDWIC is very often purely technical, as in, yeah, people are fine to publish the data. Now, how do we do it technically? While in MoveBon, they still have to also solve the problem of, yeah, people not wanting to share their data for good or bad reasons. And on the other end, how once all that data is mobilized, how can we crunch it down into essential biodiversity variables that are relevant to policy? Like what attributes do we need in the data so that movement data is not typical species occurrence data, but is something new that other species occurrence data cannot bring to those essential biodiversity variables. And in the way we standardize our movement data to occurrence data, I mean, it is unique in the fact that all of those occurrences have the same individual ID or organism ID if it's the same animal. So you can actually make tracks of an individual. So that is not lost. That is something I think unique to our data. But maybe they will need more. And we've gone through the list of essential biodiversity variables, and yeah, there's many that movement data can contribute to. For example, one of the ones is when you're capturing an animal to attach a tracker, very often you also collect biometrics data, which you typically don't get otherwise in a casual observation. And that is data that can be really used for species traits, as in what's the minimum maximum weight of this species, what is the bill length of this gull, for example. And those are measurements that are typically taken when tagging birds or ringing. But like for the purpose of movement data to track individuals, that is the type of data you typically don't think about when thinking about movement data, but is actually quite unique. Well, not unique, but it is there in movement data that we take for granted, but is useful in the larger scheme of data about species.
Yeah, I would argue that there's data in there like habitat use and behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, that is data that can be derived from the movement data. Yeah. So yeah, there's that too.
Are those kind of things relevant to EBVs and?
Yeah, the EBVs work at 6 levels from like individual species over genetic to habitat to populations. So it's at all those levels where movement data can be contributing to some more than to others. And I think the exercise we did at the workshop, like all the workshop material, the organizers are now crunching through that to see how they can present that in a more usable way. But I think what's interesting at this point is that this has just started. This was a planning workshop. So this is an initiative that has just started last month. So it's the perfect time to get on board and contribute. And yeah, your almost at the same playing field as anybody that has contributed to that workshop. As in, yeah, they want engagement. That is what they want in this BOM, and also longer term. That is the whole goal of a biodiversity observation network, is bringing people together from all professions on movement data to see how can we get this more on the radar of policy.
Yeah, cool. Well, I guess oh yeah, you've got the workshop here, and I guess if there's if there's anyone here who's interested in that initiative and the Biologging Society initiative, just let us know in the document, and we can make sure they're added to.
I don't know what communication channels they will use, but I think it's always interesting, especially if you're interested in machine observations data, to also sign up for Wild Labs, which is a community of professionals working with conservation technology, which is much broader than movement data. But Wild Labs was one of the co-organizers, together with the Smithsonian Institute, of the MoveBON planning workshop. So I'm pretty sure if you sign up for Wild Labs, which has a number of forums that you can sign up to and meet other people working with biologging data, camera trap data, eDNA data, that they will announce on their forums too updates on the MoveBON initiative. But we can share it through the Slack channel as well that we have for this group.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think I tried to dial into one of those sessions, but it was difficult to kind of connect, I guess, with from online. Did you, John? Did you find that?
No, I mean, they had a pretty good in-room group that were trying to make things work, but they did have the big hiccup on the first day. But after that, they figured out how to keep me connected in. And then by the time it was time to do our panel, I felt really good about it. They did a good job with the tech in the room. Yeah, by the end of it. One thing I'll say, Peter summed everything up beautifully about the MoveBON workshop, but I think he understated the degree to which the work that he's undertaken with Sarah Davidson and with myself and with the folks at the European Tracking Network as well has set the playing field for these folks at MoveBON to come in and connect a lot of data to policy very quickly. It's the kind of quiet work that happens, and then all of a sudden the momentum is gained and the ball rolls down the hill really easily. And that's down to a lot of tireless work by Peter and by the people who sort of connect in this interest group and make sure that we're all wearing all those hats, or we're all under those umbrellas together, learning how to do this stuff across domains. We set ourselves up very beautifully to contribute to this MoveBON initiative. So I look forward to the opportunity.
Yeah, and one of the things I've stated at the panel as a goal forward that I can see that is achievable, I mean, if we find funding, but I think it's technically achievable, is to have 1,000 movement data sets on GBIF. As in, let's have that as a goal that we can work towards, and that is then MoveBank data, which already has 1,000 data sets that are publicly available, but might not all be documented with metadata to the extent that we want. There's data in the Ocean Tracking Network that John coordinates, I mean, and they're already publishing data to GBIF. There's ATN, who's now going to ramp this up to the European Tracking Network to do the same with the same process that John is using. And that is only movement data. And I think we can really scale this up. And I think 1,000 data sets is a cool goal to have. And then also see, because having 1,000 data sets on GBIF also means that all the steps towards that worked, as in the data is standardized, the people were willing to share the data, it is actually usable data. And then the impact that is going to have, trying to figure out, okay, how is this now feeding EBVs? You can then actually try that and see how that is working, what elements might be missing. So, but yeah, people were excited about that goal.
Yeah, I'm excited. I really like that. I really like that idea. We're currently at Zoetrack, the animal tracking platform that I managed was decommissioned. A while ago, it was taken offline because of security concerns. I've got 600 data sets in there, which I think can translate down to, I think once I clean up, I think I'm looking at about 300. Because there was a lot of test data sets in there and a lot of teaching data sets and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'd like to sort of be part of that goal as well. And so, sorry, Ben, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hopefully I don't want to defer too much, but speaking of machine observations on Darwin Core and GBIF, how are tracks lines being done in terms of when you have a line, a migration or something from an animal and you've got a species occurrence? I mean, how is that spatial data being captured when it translates over to Darwin Core?
It is done as multiple occurrences that
Okay.
all have the shared organism ID.
Okay.
And they also have a shared parent event ID, which is the identifier of the deployment. The reason why we don't have a single occurrence with, for example, a line geospatial polygon is because then you lose the temporal information of when the species was somewhere. So that is why we have one. Also, I mean, those are occurrences. That species, sorry, that individual was there at a specific place and time, and then it moved, and it was also there at a specific place and time. So those you can just consider as in, species occurrence data. I mean, it was a machine observation of an individual that occurred there, but by having the shared parent event ID and especially the organism ID, you are able to make a track. What we do, though, is as a convention, and this is both for the telemetry data, the acoustic telemetry data, as GPS tracking data, is we sample the data down to the first record per hour. As in, if you have a measurement that is taking recordings every 30 seconds, you create a lot of data that is typically not that might be useful for very granular movement ecology research, but less so in the context of species occurrence data and EBVs. So we take the first record. We don't average. It is the first record. So you keep the original identifier of the source database. And then you say, this is the first of 30 records, for example. It could also be the first of one record. And then okay, within this hour, it has not been sampled down. And I think that works quite well. I mean, this is something we came up in the Move to GBIF project with Sarah Davidson. And I think the same approach is now used for acoustic telemetry. And it works quite well there too, because sometimes those are fish that are detected by a receiver, and especially on canals when they're like stuck at the sluice, like get lots and lots of pings, like the data is ramping up in frequency. It's not that useful. You kind of want to know, okay, where was it hour per hour? So that is that's how we create tracks.
You don't care when it's sleeping. It's temporally, it's hourly. That's how you break up a line out. That's great.
Yeah. It reflects an existing practice in acoustic telemetry where you sample down your data into events. And so it keeps the data appropriate for a lot of the follow-on analyses that happen in acoustic telemetry, which has been very convenient for us especially. So we're very fortunate that the standard kind of locked into a time step and a sort of subsampling scheme that was already in use by a lot of our researchers.
Yeah, that's really good. And this is the origin of organism ID. I get that question a lot with collections. So this is really where that's what I figured. Okay, great.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be called individual ID in Darwin Core before, but now it's generalized to organism ID. You also have organism name, but yeah, that is how it is. One of the things that we should figure out with GBIF, but this is broader than this group, is identifying data sets of a certain type on GBIF. For example, GPS tracking, acoustic telemetry, camera traps. There are ways to do it if you know what to look for, but it's not ideal. And like this data set level tagging with data types, it is not event type. It's not even that. It's really at the data set level type. It would be useful to have more controlled vocabularies for that data set level thing. Because, for example, if I'm looking for machine observations only, I will kick out the human observations that we have in a tracking data set of when the bird was captured and attached to the tag, because that is a human observation, and all the rest are machine observations. The human observation is also useful. We misuse collection codes in our occurrence data to identify the system where the data was coming from, MoveBank, Agouti, ATN, OTN. So those are digital collections. I mean,
It makes
Yeah.
sense, but I can see why.
yeah, that is frowned upon, but we really want to indicate the data system where it is coming from. And it is not the data set name, because that is the specific study data set within
Right.
that data system.
Right.
It allows me at least to very easily search on GBIF, give me all records that are coming from ATN.
Yeah.
There might be better practices, but so far, yeah, I mean, collection codes, they prefer that this is reserved for like real life non-digital collections, but I haven't found a good alternative yet. So that is currently the practice that we have.
So-
yeah.
This would be sort of so your resource type, I guess it's not resource type, but whether it's tracking data, acoustic data, any kind of like the data, it's almost like the type of data it is, and that would be data set. Because I suggested material entity type that's getting added, but that doesn't work here because that's a cast or a thin section, some sort of physical object that doesn't apply here at all. Yeah.
I've heard winds of a term called dataset category. That perhaps we're talking about that might. It seems like there are some data types where you can go and look for, the particular fields that are populated, say to find eDNA data, if, for example, as material sample with something else. Anyway, there's different ways to go and find it, but it would be to bring these data set types into the parlance of sort of normal people when they're looking for them would be useful. I mean, maybe that's something that we could start to break on with, at least what we consider to be machine observation type projects. Like there's like this, I've had to go and look up this radar tracking that you were talking about earlier, Peter, because the Australian government's put out a tender for a movement data platform and asked for radar data, and I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, I mean, if you're involved in that, also talk with Holger. And I can also bring you in touch with some people who have developed databases for tracking radar to like collect this together with other movement data.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I saw something that Holger had, and it's not so it's very hard to detect species. I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm specifically talking about storing that data. He gave a talk about this at the Hobart TEDWIC meeting.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, okay, I think this covers it for movement data. I think it would be useful to go to the next section. So that was MoveBon, and I think we also covered the International Biologging Society, as in that is a group where there's also a working group on data standards, and they will definitely align with what is happening under MoveBon, and we should also align with them. I'm curious what they will do, as in they might think about a standard for movement data in general, so tracking data. I mean, MoveBank is a bit of the big elephant in the room there that already has done a lot of standardization of tracking data. If that should be the standard to publish raw tracking data that then can be converted to Darwin Core, or if it is immediately Darwin Core data package. I think that is some of the things that this group will need to decide on. What's the best way to archive source tracking data?
What's Sarah's opinion on that? Is she ready for MoveBank to be that default or no?
I would say that she will probably say, well, it's very MoveBank related, and they have a lot of terms there and specific to MoveBank. I don't necessarily agree. I think they have done a very good work at making sure that all these terms are referenceable, I mean, this is a vocabulary of terms that you can use.
Sure.
I think it's a very, very good starting point. Not all the terms in there are generic enough, but it's a very good starting point. And the model at least works quite well for much of the movement data that you have that you can express as tracks. Yeah.
Maybe my connection as well. That's true.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, the discussions have gotten locked up in, what is a standard, what is what is movement data to begin with, and here's our conceptual problem, and are we all talking about the same thing when we're talking about data? And I think it was really useful that Anna Sequeira's paper, when that came out, saying there's with sensor data, I think it's true. You have your data that comes off these four completely different stages of data that you need to manage, not just the sort of publishing at the end. Like there's the raw data that comes off the sensor, then the association of the metadata about the organism, and then the cleaned up data, and then the gridded data, and those kinds of things. So whether we get stuck in those sorts of conversations again, or sort of, I like, to be honest, Peter, I really like this approach that you're talking about, have a goal of publishing X number of data sets in GBIF. I think will sort of move things further, further down the track more quickly. And I would probably, in participating in those forums myself, or whoever I send in from the ALA would be looking at promoting, GBIF, Darwin Core and GBIF as a way of aggregating multiple data sets as the best way to do that. Because most of it's very project focused as well, right?
Yeah. So I think to wrap up the movement section, the paper that I just added in the chat is a very recent paper, gives a good overview of where we are with movement data. It's also the bit of the starting point for this MoveBOM initiative, and also mentions the International Biologging Society and the work that needs to be done, and like the stages of the data. Say it's a good overview of the current state.
So
go ahead.
Oh, Peter. So moving on in the agenda, the whole next part is pretty much camera trap focused. Well, we've got Darwin Core and Darwin Core data package. Do you want to? I feel like there's quite a few things here that you're speaking to, and can I give you a rest and tell you about wild obs in Australia next?
Sure. Yeah.
I'd say, if that's a thing. We at the ALA have been involved with an initiative called Wild Obs, and Peter, I haven't managed to catch up with you about this at all, but have you been across it at all? Heard about it?
I believe so, but I need to check who's leading that initiative.
It's a collaboration between a number of organisations here in Australia.
Is that also Matthew Luskin?
Yes. Yes, he's involved with it. So he's been involved with some of the
He's the director of Wild Obs, I see now. So yeah, I've been in touch with him because they wanted to use the camera trap data management platform Agouti for managing their data, and then also making it easier to publish into CamTrapDB. I don't know much about the Wild Obs initiatives on itself. We've been in touch with Matthew on the with his lab, basically.
Hang on a sec. Am I sharing my screen?
Yes, you are.
All right. I'm sharing the wrong screen, so I hope there's nothing bodgy there. Oh God. Okay. So Yeah, Wild Obs is an Australian initiative. It's sort of a collaboration between a number of organisations, and what they want to build is an image management platform, which you're talking about, Peter, and they've made an agreement that they're in the process of signing an MOU with Agouti to use their software for the camera trap processing system. And then they're building a camera trap database, and they're using CamTrap DP as their data standard, I guess, under which they're which is the sort of central entities to that model. That's where they'll do a lot of their processing and modeling. And they've built we've managed to convince them that it's a good idea to use the Atlas of Living Australia as a tagged image repository, because we manage, we have an image repo up against for our occurrence records. So the ALA will serve images and occurrence record. I told them that a tagged image repository, which is an image with tagged with information about the occurrence, about the record. One way or another, we can serve up data sets in that way. And they went through a really nice process of selecting software and the data standard and the ALA and preferring Darwin Core and CamTrap DP, which I might share with you, Peter, because it's a really nice a really nice they really loved the work, the camera trap work. So I'll send these links, but they are basically Matt and his team are collecting data sets from all over Australia and putting them either through their Agouti system or combining them in there. They have an analyst who's converting all of their data sets into CamTrap DP. Which is really cool, and they'll do they're hoping to do national scale analyses using CamTrap DP. So, and then what we're doing in the ALA is where we decided to try to ingest these data sets as event core rather than use the occurrence core conversion that's in the IPT. In the ALA, we have an event system in pilot, and this event system makes it so that we can overcome the limitation of being able to have of the Darwin Core star schema for multimedia. So we could have the multimedia hang off the occurrence record or the event record just through our systems. So I've got Raj here in the room, and Raj is a data engineer on my team. He's been basically writing a script to convert CamTrap DP to event core. So we've done that. This is our pilot event system here, and we've got the data set. A data set in test, which we're putting into production soon, and it's the sample data set that the analyst who's doing all this work has compiled himself. It breaks the events. It has an event hierarchy, I guess, and I'll just sort of demonstrate that here. We have this event system kind of reads in the hierarchies of events. So we've got surveys have deployments. A deployment will have a trigger of some sort. You can have measurements associated with deployments, and then occurrences hang off the trigger. And that trigger was an interesting problem that Zach came across, and probably want to have some sort of conversation about, but likewise trying to work out what a threshold is for an occurrence record.
Peggy,
yeah.
where do the media hang off from? or
The media hang off the occurrence record. So these, so if we look at each event, each event somehow has occurrence records. The occurrence records are processed by our occurrence pipeline, just like any other occurrence record in the ALA, and each record then will have an image, which it doesn't at the moment, Raj, because we're still shunting images around.
how do you attach the images to the occurrences if you already used up your star schema to go event occurrence?
Oh, well, we built a different, we sort of got around that with our own implementation of this event system. So we logied it. we made it so that it would work. So we've done a data model. I can share with you an article that describes how that works, but we're testing that out with this system.
And the WildOps, so WildOps is using ChemtraDP to exchange data and do metadata analysis. As any of those ChemtraDPs, do they make it to JBIF? Either through ALA or directly, or?
Yeah, so we will, that's a next step. We'll work that out.
And are you planning to do that from your event occurrence media view of the data, or are you going to publish the ChemtraDPs directly to JBIF, which is also possible?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. I'm not sure at this point.
Yeah, I would recommend the latter, to publish the ChemtraDPs to JBIF, because there's a lot of stuff that is then possible on top of those ChemtraDPs in JBIF. And yeah, I can talk about that too.
Yeah. No, I think we can have a look at. Yeah, I haven't been quite sure about how to do that, how to get them through to GBIF just yet, but we take either one of those pathways.
Okay, cool. Well, quickly on ChemtraDP, I'm just going to quickly share the link again to the standard. So since it has been published version 1, November 23, the adoption has really gone bonkers, which is fantastic. I mean, by data management platforms, by software that can read it, including software that we maintain, and also by JBIF. And like the first results of that are already visible. There are currently, I think, 8 ChemtraDP datasets that have been published to JBIF. And you can recognize them by protocol equals ChemtraDP. So if the WildOps are also published like that, they will also appear here. In Europe, we currently have a project running called Big Picture, which brings 18 organizations to do meta-analysis of camera trap data in Europe and figure out the legal stuff too, and also publish data. And one of the things we want to do is publish data to JBIF and then extract it from JBIF through a hosted portal that is camera trap only. So you can see like the camera trap data that is there in JBIF, and the filter we're going to use is this one, because yeah, I mean, this will give us the Darwin Core version of the data, but through the metadata, we can also access the initial ChemtraDP and lift up metadata that is there in that file that is not there in the Darwin Core archive, provide even richer metadata. For example, oh, I'm only interested in data sets that have annotated at the image level because I want to do machine learning algorithms. You will be able to find that because that is all indicated in the metadata of ChemtraDP. So that is why publishing in this one format will allow us to build something cool on top of that. There's a project we submitted to Wild Labs, which I've mentioned before, Wild Lab Awards. Yeah, it's unclear if we'll have the funding because there's a lot of competition, but if not, we will try to attempt to do this through the Big Picture project. So that is in traditional camera traps. It's really taking off. The R package that we develop is also working well. It's also going to be helping to upconvert data sets from older versions to the standard to newer versions. Right now, there's only one version, but it's future-proof. And then there's been interest from 2 domains. One is a project called Insect AI, which is doing automated monitoring of insects using quote-unquote camera traps, where the AI is doing lots of the identifications, and they've now decided to also adopt ChemTrack-DP as a standard, but they have some suggestions for changes. So that is what they will work on the coming 2 years to like see if those changes actually make sense, if that is the data that they get out of it with those changes is actually usable. But that is one change that is going to happen to ChemTrack-DP, is to make it more insect camera trap friendly. Another one is from the passive acoustic monitoring community, and that is a project I'm involved in. It is led by Julia Wheel from Nina in Norway, also funded through Wild Labs, called Safe and Sound, to assess if ChemTrack-DP is a good fit for sharing acoustic monitoring data. Which, I mean, simplified, rather than your media files being images or videos, it's just audio files. There's properties that you need there too that are currently not there, but we've gone through the whole exercise, and I think it is going to be better to adapt ChemTrack-DP to cater to them rather than having a spin-off of ChemTrack-DP for acoustic data. So my colleague Sanne Hovard and Julia are leading this short project to just explore that. But they had use cases from everywhere, including people from Cornell, which have huge bioacoustics libraries, who were really interested in a simpler standard for sharing acoustic data. So that is very promising. There is going to be a session about this at the Living Data conference in Colombia. Either both a workshop and a session on passive acoustic monitoring. By the way, there's also going to be a session on MoveBon at that same conference. So it is the place to be if you want to be kept up to date on that type of machine observation data. There is not going to be one on camera traps. I mean, yeah, I can only split myself in so many things. Yeah, I think it's really promising that even for the acoustic data, ChemTrack-DP might be a good fit. So I think the first actual results in production use we're going to see are probably 2 years down the line, because now there's a lot of exploration and testing with branches of the standard that they can then use. Because I want it to be approached the same way as we approached ChemTrack-DP, which is through a lot of rigorous testing, use cases, software implementation, to then see this works before we adapt the standards. So not changing the standard and then seeing if it works. It's the other way around that we do it for ChemTrack-DP. So yeah, that's the things that are happening. And I think the latest is that Wildlife Insights, which is a huge platform for camera trap data in the US, it is also on their roadmap to have ChemTrack-DP implemented. I keep hearing it is on the roadmap. I mean, they probably have other fires to extinguish, probably. I mean, it's with any data management platform that there's things happening, but they are on board. And I was really happy to hear that, at least for Wild Ops, they've now adopted the GUTI, where data are by default exported as ChemTrack-DP. So, and the data sets that you can see in that last link that I shared on GBIF, all of them are coming out of a GUTI, except for one where people have gone through the trouble of mapping Wildlife Insights data themselves to ChemTrack-DP, which is, yeah, I mean, bravo to them.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Hopefully that is going to be easier in the future, where Wildlife Insights just support it out of the box.
Oh yeah, Wildlife Insights not supporting it at the moment? No.
Not at the moment, no. So yeah, that's a quick update on ChemTrack-DP. I'm really, really grateful of like how successful this has become, and people were like really interested in like using this. And a project like Big Picture would not have been possible without that standards to do research. But now they're already thinking about the next steps. Oh yeah, but what about this metadata term? And maybe Humboldt Core should be in there as well. So they really want to build on top of that. So it's the snowball is rolling.
That's yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome, and that's yeah, really good.
And in relation to DADWIC, one of the things I want to explore are, I mean, ChemTrack-DP is not ratified as a standard. It's a bit an odd one too, as in like the standards that DADWIC produces are typically vocabularies of terms. We have to figure out how we assess that process for ChemtrailDB. I'm now seeing some use in having ChemtrailDB also mint terms that are there currently locked as fields in a table that people want to reuse or refer to. So that has gone from what I consider more of an academic exercise. Yeah, let's have these terms, to something where people are wanting this. So that is, yeah, one approach that we could tackle, to, yeah, have a list of terms that are invented by ChemtrailDB and expose those just like Darwin Core terms are, or Audubon Core terms are, with review from the technical advisory group. But I don't have a timeline for that work yet.
I'll tell you, that question is coming at the at the tag meeting about
I know.
why ChemtrailDB is ratified and kind of what its place is in the Tadwig infrastructure kind of sits. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I know it's a, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we have gone really implementation focused with ChemtrailDB, and like bringing it into the official standard umbrella. We need to see when and how we are going to tackle that. Yeah, so that's an update on ChemtrailDB.
Yeah, that's cool. Just when you're talking about those terms, is that are they things like if GB is supporting more vocabularies, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but with the new Darwin Core data package, we'd be looking that there'd be many communities wanting to create many terms, right?
True. I mean, it's not directly related to, I mean, there's two things. One is, let's say you're designing a database for acoustic data, and you want to have a field that is the height of your device, how high it was above the ground.
Yeah.
There's not a term for that in Audubon Core. There's not a term elsewhere, but there is a term for that in ChemtrailDB. So you could refer to that term in ChemtrailDB, but then it is very locked in the ChemtrailDB table of deployments. While we could also just expose that term as a URL where you can go to and you get the definition of the term. And then people can say, well, I use that term. So that is what we could do in ChemtrailDB. In addition to the structure, the formats, the model, is to also have the terms as their own entities listed. And if you then translate the ChemtrailDB to Darwin Core data package, then yes, those could be community provided terms that you can list in attributes, just as all the terms that are there in the MoveBank attribute dictionary. The number of satellites that were used to get a lock on the signal, that is a MoveBank term. That is a property you could attach to your occurrence in Darwin Core data package. What's it called? Attribution. No, not attribution. So that measurement or fact, basically, in Darwin Core data package. And just like measurement or facts, you can invent whatever you want there. It's of course more useful if you use terms that other people have invented, because that makes the data much more interoperable. If you then say, well, this is the length of the bill, and somebody says bill length, how do you know that that is the same thing? But if you refer to the same identifier for bill length with an attached definition, then at least you know, okay, you both mean this thing. Now I know I can just merge that data together. So that is why those community terms are relevant, and ChemtrailDB could provide those. MoveBank already is providing those. OTN could provide those, but I'm guessing many of them are already in the MoveBank attribute dictionary. There's huge vocabularies that the BODC is also providing that we can link to. So yeah, that is, if that data is being ingested by GBIF, that is what we're going to really allow to go beyond the typical biodiversity data, even though that is now also split up much more into a model in Darwin Core data package.
So just saying in the chat, Peter, that we usually mint something in BODC NERC but it would be very powerful for the hyper-specific things that our researchers create. So I see the value very much.
Yeah, and all of mood bank terms are also in BODC. And yeah, that leads us into Darwin Core Data Package, and there's also going to be a session about that, a double session hopefully at Living Data in Colombia, where the new standard will be presented with a number of use cases. There is no use case on machine observations data except for eDNA that will be presented there as a use case, but not movement data or camera trap data, because yeah, the session only allows time for a number of things. But survey data is going to be presented there, collection data, eDNA data, and also just plain occurrence data. Like how do you, like if you're used to Darwin Core occurrence flat table, how do you do that in the Darwin Core Data Package? And yeah, I think that standard, but to be standard, the work that John Wieczorek has done there is tremendous, and really modeling all biodiversity data into a model that makes sense to publishers, hopefully, and to GBIF and the users. But yeah, it is breaking the star schema finally, so you can model your data in a way that makes sense. And at that point, we can also see like how should we model or movement data to Darwin Core. So depending on the timeline for like MoveBon, for example, or the working group there, rather than trying to cram it into Darwin Core archives, we could immediately look like, hey, let's just publish as Darwin Core data packages, which are going to be a nicer fit to express the data as we're used to. Hopefully.
That's true. Perhaps we can recommend that, chasing that use case to those initiatives.
Yeah, but again, I think all of it is in like trying it out, testing, just like we did 5+ years ago in trying to map movement data or OTN data to Darwin Core archives. Like we have to redo that exercise and see how Darwin Core data package could be a better fit. So that is work under this group. But yeah, it sometimes feel like the machine observations group is a bit of a hollow group, but the people that are here and involved under this umbrella are doing lots of works in International Biologging Society, ChemTrapDB, people that are managing infrastructures. So yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It is sort of still a useful connection point. For some of these initiatives, right? Yeah, I see so the maintenance group is probably going to go out. That goes out for public, hoping to go out for public review before the Living Data conference. So that might be something.
The public review of Darwin Core data package, you mean?
I think so.
Yeah, it is. And in regards of upcoming task groups for machine observations, the work that is going to be done on movement data, I don't think is going to be a task group under machine observations. That's more likely going to be under the Biologging Society. If a standard comes out of that, then it could be ratified through the TEDWIC process. I mean, an upcoming potential task group is ratifying ChemTrapDB and minting ChemTrapDB terms. But yeah, that is.
What about the?
That is an item.
What about the passive acoustics?
That one, yes, but that could work within the framework of adding new things to ChemTrapDB. ChemTrapDB has a versioning mechanism built in and like consensus that needs to happen, similar to how Darwin Core works, except it's not going through the public review process of 30 days. But yeah, I think that is process of changing ChemTrapDB, which like with any software versioning, can be done. how to bring CamDP under Tedwick as a standard is work for a task group. Which then could also state like, yeah, how are you going to tackle things in the future with acoustic? And my approach so far has been mostly, we'll see what comes, and like we have versioning, so we can version however we want. And I've also been careful in telling the people with acoustic data or the insect AI people, I mean, a standard moves slow, so don't expect changes like the next year. You need to test, and then we can adopt things.
Nice.
I will say,
No.
if you did go ratification, it would be a fairly straightforward process. I mean, most of the work's done. I mean, usage
Yeah.
reports, feature, all that stuff is just already done. I mean, I think it would sail through.
Yeah.
We need expert review or review manager, which would be difficult, but we need, you know, but it would also put more structure around things too, like, you know, annual reviews of the terms and all that kind of stuff. So, which,
Yeah.
versioning things, yeah.
It's true.
Cool. Oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, so I think we've gotten through all of the stuff on the agenda, and we're done with time. So I think we might wrap up. Is there anything else we need to cover? No. Cool.
No.
Well, thank you very much.
Keep a look at the Slack, and I mean, if you're interested in machine observations broadly, I highly recommend signing up for wildlabs.net. I mean, it's a good community there, much broader than the Tedwick community, more on the technical and other stuff. But yeah, I mean, for any standard related stuff, that will be added to the Slack channel of this group.
Thanks, Peter. And thanks for all your work. Great. And thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Thanks,
Thank
Ben, for running the show.
Sure.
And
It's tough.
see you later.
Thanks for putting us together and convene, Peggy. Always good to see y'all.
Very good to see you too.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone. See you.
Bye.
Yep.